Let us praise a famous man and our fathers who beget us. All these men were honored in their generation and won glory in their time. We are here today to give thanks for the life of Harold Abrahams, to honor the legend. Now there are just two of us who can remember, who can close our eyes and think back to a time so long ago, to those few young men with hope in their hearts and wings on their heels. Those words are in the opening scene of the 1981 Academy Award-winning film, Chariots of Fire. Hello, my name is Phil Easter, historian and writer from Baltimore, Maryland, also known as the Amazing Memory Man. We're recording tonight on Sunday, January 21st, 2024. This is story number 44 on my YouTube channel, which is Phil Easter, the Amazing Memory Man. Indeed, the 1981 Academy Award-winning film, Chariots of Fire, has become my favorite movie of all time. Next month, on February 11th, it will be exactly 42 years to the day when I first saw this wonderful movie at a theater in Timonium, Maryland, close to Baltimore City. I went with a friend named Brian. We were both runners at that time. I was 29 years old, and this movie touched me in so many ways, not just the running scenes, but filmed in England and Scotland, where I'd been just a few years before. I've been to England a number of times, but in 1979 I took a wonderful trip of 15 weeks to many parts of Great Britain and Ireland, including Scotland. And my interest in the Olympic Games, I'd already been to two great Olympic Games at that point, Munich 1972 and Montreal 1976, to see some of the best track and field athletes in the world as well as other sports. So this movie touched me in a combination of many ways. And also, the two young men, Harold Abrahams and Eric Liddell, had to stand for certain principles they believed in. At times, people pressured them to go against what they believed in. And it's just a wonderful story, true story about those British athletes who took part in the 1924 Paris Olympics. 100 years ago this year, the Games were in Paris, and once again later this year, in July and August, the world's greatest sports event will return to the City of Lights. Harold Abrahams was born on December 15th, 1899. As a young man, the high school he went to, he knew anti-Semitism because he was Jewish, and some people made fun of him for that reason. But fortunately, at Cambridge University, he enjoyed many activities. Not only was he a great runner, and often in Britain they call track and field simply athletics, whereas in the United States the word athletics could mean any number of sports, but in Britain that usually means track and field in particular. And he was a very good runner on the athletics team, and also he played the piano well. He sang very well. He took part in Gilbert and Sullivan productions, some of their operas, and also wrote for the college newspaper. Sometimes when he wrote about his own track and field victories, he would simply say, "From a special correspondent." He was very good at the 100 and 200 meter runs. Actually, before the Olympics in Paris, more often he would run the yards. They used English measurements then for most track meets, but when he got to the Olympics, it was meters, but a slight difference. But the 100-yard dash was a little less than 100 meters, and they had the 220-yard run, which was close to 200 meters. And also he excelled at the long jump. Some of the British officials thought he should qualify for the long jump for the 24 Olympics also, but he decided to just concentrate on the running races of the 100 and 200. He thought he had better chances at those races. And Also, Eric Liddell, he was born in China, actually, on January 16th, 1902. His parents were missionaries stationed in China for many years, but he went to Scotland, where his parents were from, in 1907, a few years after he was born. He was still pretty young, and stayed there for a number of years. He became a great rugby player, as well as a very good runner. By the time he was 18 years old, he was one of Scotland's best rugby players, and played internationally for Scotland in rugby. But he believed that it was wrong to take part in sports on a Sunday, to take part in any sport at all. There's one point in the movie where he scolds a young boy for playing rugby on a Sunday, but he says, well, tomorrow we can get together and bring your whole family if you like. We can play a friendly game then. So his dilemma became this, that he was one of the favorites for the 100 meters in Paris 1924. But a few months before, he found out that the heats for the 100 meters was scheduled on a Sunday, Sunday, July 6, 1924. And so even though it's preliminary runs, you have to do well enough in the heats to make it to the semifinal and the finals after that. So according to his conscience, he could not run that event. He'd have to withdraw, even though the final was Monday, July 7th, but even some of the heats were scheduled for that Sunday, so he could not run. And many British officials criticized him, saying that he should put his country first, but he really felt that it was wrong to compete on Sunday. That's what he believed in. But he entered two other races, the 200 meters and the 400, but he was not expected to win those. He was one of the best in Britain at those two events, but some American runners were considered the favorites in those events. So when they got to Paris in 24, Abrahams and Liddell, both on the British Olympic team, a few years before that they would race against each other in Britain, but this time they were on the same team, and Abrahams was scheduled for the 100 and 200 and the relay also, and Liddell would run the 200 and the 400. Now in the movie, they do not show Liddell running the 200 meters, where he did finish third, a respectable third place for the bronze medal. Abrahams was in the 100 meters, was not one of the favorites compared to two American runners, Charlie Paddock and Jackson Schultz. Paddock was the defending champion from Antwerp 4 years before. In 1920, he won the gold medal. And Jackson Schultz was nicknamed the New York Thunderbolt, and was also one of the favorites in 1924 for the 100-meter gold medal. But on the July 7th, Abrahams pulled the upset. He did win the 100 meters, and I think Jackson Schultz was second. And those days, this may surprise many people, the medals were not given at any special ceremony. A few weeks after the Olympics were over, when these athletes were back home, they were mailed to them. Yeah, they actually mailed the medals just in a mail package. No great ceremony, but still many people knew that they won medals in different countries because the newspaper articles would cover that. But it's much different now. You have a medal ceremony, and of course in the age of television and also the internet, it's a great feeling, I'm sure, for athletes winning medals. The same day, usually they're awarded sometime after their event. But in those days, you just received your medal in a mail package. But a few days later, Abrahams was also in the relay, but the British team finished second. The four Americans together were just a little faster than the four Britons, but Abrahams had his Olympics a gold and silver medal. Eric Liddell ran in the 400 meters on Friday, July 11th, 1924, and as shown in the movie, which was pretty accurate, I checked some of these things later. Indeed, he ran the first 200 almost as fast as Schultz, who won the 200 meters, and was just a 200. And people thought, well, he'll probably slow down, but he didn't seem to. He just ran all out. No one ever saw a 400-meter race like that. He set a world record 47.6 seconds, a world record for that time. And he was hailed a great hero in Scotland. The next year, in 1925, Eric Liddell returned to China. Now, as a young man, as a missionary, like his parents were, he would live in China the rest of his life. He would visit Scotland briefly 2 more times, in 1932 and 1939. But during World War II, in 1943, Eric Liddell was captured by the Japanese. The Japanese had conquered much of China during World War II, and sadly, he died on February 21st, 1945, at a Japanese internment camp. He was just 43 years old. But he touched many people throughout his life, doing many kind acts. As a matter of fact, he actually could have been freed. The British government were trying to arrange just a few of the prisoners to be freed. The Japanese agreed to that, but Eric Liddell actually suggested that a pregnant woman should take his place. And so she was freed and was able to go back to Britain. And Eric Liddell died shortly thereafter. A very brave and noble act on his part. A great athlete and a true man of principle, Eric Liddell, one of the most famous heroes of Scotland. Harold Abrahams lived a long life. He became a lawyer and also a journalist, and he made track and field athletics more popular than ever in Great Britain through a number of articles, and he would announce many track meets. As a matter of fact, he was the British announcer for the BBC radio at the 1936 Berlin Olympics, when Jesse Owens of the United States became the great athletic hero there, winning 4 gold medals. But Abrahams announced many of the track events at those Berlin Games. He died on January 14th, 1978, 78 years old. In the movie, most of the scenes are pretty accurate. The one scene, however, they show Eric Liddell, he was talking to the Prince of Wales and some other high-ranking British officials, the Prince of Wales, who would become the king one day. And it's like they were pressuring him to change his mind and run in the 100 meters. But that scene really did not happen. He knew some months ahead of time that the 100 would be scheduled on a Sunday, at least the heats for the 100. But it does show that he was a man of principle. He stuck to his principles and refused to run that race. He might have won a medal there, but it's just a great story, I think, how he was still rewarded by winning a gold medal in another race that he was not expected to win. The movie had a very beautiful title theme and music throughout the movie composed by Vangelis. He composed many movie scores, but this is the most famous, the title theme from Chariots of Fire. The movie won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture of 1981. The actors were Ben Cross and Ian Charleson, who played Abrahams and Liddell in the movie. And this is interesting how the details were so accurate for so many things, and it may seem like a minor point to some people, but I was impressed that the actual numbers they wore at the Paris Olympics were shown in the movie accurately, and certain crowd scenes, they took the time to make it very accurate to the type of clothing people wore. People dressed up more back then, 100 years ago, and many men were expected to wear suits even to sports events, and suit and tie. And even in American baseball games, I've seen photographs from the 1920s that men were often expected to wear a jacket and tie. Women wore very nice dresses. The 1920s formalities, but they weren't wearing jeans too much back then, or t-shirts. But anyhow, Chariots of Fire was awarded Best Picture in 1981. It came to this country. Most people in America saw it in 82. But it's also the man who was executive producer of Chariots of Fire, his name was Dodi Fayed. It is sad that he was executive producer of several movies, and This was one of his movies, and he was the man who, years later, became friends with Princess Diana after she broke up with Prince Charles, and he was the man who sadly died in the car accident with Princess Diana on August 31st, 1997. Dodi Fayed, the executive producer of Chariots of Fire. Another producer was David Putman, and the director was Hugh Hudson. It's a wonderful movie. Most of the facts are accurate about the story of Abrahams and Liddell. I strongly recommend that people should see this movie. And also on YouTube, you can find a story called The Real Chariots of Fire, which is narrated by actor Nigel Havers, who also had a part in the movie as one of the other runners who was a friend of Harold Abrahams. Chariots of Fire, the story of two British athletes, Harold Abrahams and Eric Liddell. This is Phil Easter, the amazing memory man. We'll see you next time, another story on another subject. Thank you, Happy New Year, and good night.